So as you guys probably know, victory cups are going to be a big deal this season. If you're not familiar with them, victory cups are one of the best ways to get earnings in Fortnite, because simply getting one win in the second round of this tournament actually guarantees you $100. So with that in mind, what we're going to do in this video is discuss exactly how to dominate victory cups in Fortnite Chapter 4 Season 3, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a clear path to earnings and basically know exactly what to do. Before we get into it though, be sure to drop a like on the video if it helps you out, subscribe to the channel if you're new and want to see more, and of course, it's always appreciated if you could use code Teckoh in the item shop. It's 100% free for you and only takes a few seconds to type in, and it seriously does help me out a bunch. And lastly guys, if you notice the style of the video looks a little bit different, that's just because the editor's out of town. The videos are going to be back to normal soon. Just figured I'd mention that for the active viewers out there. But with all that said and without further ado, let's get into today's video. So I just want to give some baseline information first. This is just some of the basic stuff you'll want to know. Of course, starting off, anybody has access to these tournaments as long as they're ranked in gold or higher. And of course, if they meet the other requirements like being 13 years or older. Another thing you'll want to know is the players who qualify. So in Europe and NA Central, the top 7,500 people are going to qualify to round 2. In Brazil and Asia, you're going to have 5,000. And OCE and Middle East are both going to have 2,500. Qualifying is going to take some work, but it's definitely not impossible, especially because a lot of people qualify. As you may or may not know, qualifying to round 2 puts you in a 1-hour tournament starting an hour after round 1 ends. And as I said before, each win there grants you $100. So with that said, moving on from that, this video is going to be split into 2 sections. We're going to start with obviously round 1, which is going to be the qualification round, basically where you make your way into round 2. And then we're going to talk about round 2, which is actually the money round. And if you get a win in round 2, then you make money. So starting off, I want to give you guys some tips for round 1. And the first thing to know here is about the caches, vaults, and the loot island. One change that Epic made this season to the victory cups is the fact that opening supply caches, vaults, or claiming the loot island are all going to grant you 3 points each. Now I know this doesn't sound like a huge amount at first, but it actually equates to 3 kills worth of points, which is pretty solid. And honestly, in these kind of tournaments, you want to take any advantage you can get when it comes to qualifying. So with that in mind, it might be worth considering whether you want to land at a vault location or maybe even rotate into one once the card holding NPCs spawn. Obviously, you don't have to actually land in the POI to get the vault, as long as you get the key card and you open it. And of course, you may want to attach a little bit more value to claiming those caches or the loot island as well. But the thing I want you guys to keep in mind here is that they're going to be heavily contested. A lot of people are going to be going for them for the points. So don't be afraid to avoid these if it means you're going to live longer. Really, you're going to want to play the situation, but I think for the most part, most of you guys won't want to change up your strategy too much based on that. But with that said, the next tip I have for you guys is to play the point system. When it comes to this point system, 30 kills is equal to 1 win. That means that this format is huge on placement, and while getting kills is certainly going to help you out, the absolute priority is surviving into late game and gathering placement. We've had tournaments in the past where it would be like 15, 20 kills to a win, in which case it might be worth pushing for a little bit more kills. But in this tournament, it's very placement heavy, so you want to focus on that. Keep in mind here that you shouldn't be afraid to fight. Certainly get into a fight if it's going to set you up for a better mid and end game, but you definitely don't want a W key unless you're easily able to run through the lobby. And even if you're able to run through the lobby, it might be worth holding off so you can secure an easy late game and stack points. Another quick note is that the vast majority of the points that you can get are going to be within the top 20. So make sure you don't throw your game in early or mid game, because most of the points are going to be in end game. Moving on, and my biggest tip for the first round of the tournament is that for each game you get into, your priority should be preparation. What I mean by this is, since end game is going to gather you way more points than early and mid game, you're going to want to spend your early and mid game making sure that your end game turns out solid. This means that rather than focusing on fighting, you're going to want to focus on getting good loot, materials, and heals, focus on rotating early, and basically set yourself up so that when that end game comes, you're good to go. A big mistake that a lot of players make is they focus so much on the present, what's going on around them, that they don't really think ahead in the game, and that ends up getting them killed before they even get the chance to get a lot of points. So make sure that's not you. Make sure you're constantly planning ahead and basically thinking about what you're going to do a couple zones from then. This may or may not entail landing at a quiet spot to make sure you survive off spawn. So you may want to consider whether you land at a quiet spot, a busy spot, or just balance out that strategy. It's going to depend on the individual. A lot of people like to land at a big POI, get 1 or 2 kills and rotate out. Some people like to fight out the whole thing, and some people like to land uncontested, so it's totally going to depend on you. But hopefully that helps you guys out. My last tip for round 1 is simply how you should practice for it. To practice for round 1, you're going to want to stick to your fundamentals. Become a great fighter, which I have plenty of videos about doing. I believe I actually posted one the day before this video. Of course, you want to get some endgame experience, specifically in tournament matches like these, or from actual scrim servers if that's your thing. And of course, as I always talk about, you're definitely going to want to VOD review your games to figure out what went right right and wrong, and based on that, you can make adjustments for the following week. Keep in mind that even if you don't qualify a certain week, there are still 6 weeks of victory cups this season if I'm not mistaken, and there should be plenty of solo tournaments in the following seasons as well. You're bound to make some mistakes in these games, it happens. Just make sure that you're learning from those mistakes and you'll be setting yourself up really well. And overall guys, by following all those tips, I think you guys should have a much easier time in round 1. Keep in mind, you're not guaranteed to qualify. 7,500 people qualify in the biggest regions, which sounds like a lot, but actually that's a pretty small portion of the actual people that play. So really just focus on your improvement, focus on getting better, and ultimately if you play well enough, then you're going to qualify. And if not, you simply do better next week. But with that said guys, next up we're going to be getting into round 2, which is the money round. And getting into round 2, this one is actually going to be way simpler. After all, you don't need to worry about points or qualification standards. Really, the only thing we want to focus on in round 2 is going to be winning the game. And really, there's only going to be 2 major tips that I'm going to give you guys for round 2 because there's not that much to discuss. And the first of these tips is don't be afraid to fight. A lot of people get really caught up in the idea of playing for placement in these lobbies since after all, you got to get a win to make money. But they end up playing too passive, getting poor loot and HP, and they end up getting picked up as an easy kill. Keep in mind, if you've got like a mostly gray and green loadout going into endgame, you're pretty much going to be easy shark bait. These lobbies are very competitive, and to be able to actually have enough stuff to compete, you're going to need to fight some people. Now, of course, you're going to want to lean a bit on the passive side for obvious reasons, but keep in mind that fighting in these lobbies is not a bad thing, and the loot you get from these fights could totally set you up to win a game. For example, if you kill the person that got the vault or something like that, or got the loot island, you're going to be setting yourself up insanely well to win that game. So all in all, don't go around W-keying everybody in the second round, of course, that's a pretty easy way to die. But also don't play overly passive because chances are you can actually get some really good loot and benefit your game a lot by getting into some fights. Just be careful about the fights you take and really think it through before you get into one. Moving into our second tip for round 2 though, and this one is a super important one, which is to get good at endgame. When it comes to these lobbies, endgame is obviously going to be a huge factor. By the time endgame comes around, oftentimes there's 30 to 50 people left, and you got to be really comfortable in these situations to be able to make money. And that's why you're definitely going to want to focus on getting good at endgame in particular. Now don't get me wrong, the rest of the game is really important, but you're going to need to be confident in endgame in order to survive in these lobbies. Don't be afraid to go for refreshes when you need them, practice your tunneling, box fights, and of course spend time actually playing endgame, specifically in scrim lobbies and other tournaments. One other way to practice endgame, which is kind of touchy when it comes to these lobbies, is zone wars. On one hand, zone wars does have a decent amount of people, but at the same time it is creative. It's really not going to be representative of the whole situation you would run into in a real game. So I would say if you have like a 32 player zone war or something like that and you got some decent players in there, then give that a shot, but definitely don't replace your actual scrim practice with that, because the fact of the matter is, to get good in an actual endgame, you do have to play actual endgames, so just keep that in mind. I wanted to address that because I know zone wars is something I recommend pretty often, but for this exact purpose it might not be the best. So if you enjoy it, definitely do it, but don't rely on it. And lastly guys, as always, you're definitely going to want to spend some time VOD reviewing and learning from what you do right and wrong in these games. Just like I talked about in round 1, VOD reviewing and reflecting on what happened is going to be incredibly important here. Being able to learn from your mistakes and overcome those mistakes the next time you play is going to be one of the biggest things that separates you from making money or not making money. And other than these tips I've given, most of your success in these lobbies is really going to come down to basic stuff. It's going to be your specific strategy, aka the way you rotate, the way you play. It's also going to come down to your ability to win fights and play a good endgame. Round 1 might take a little more thought in terms of your strategy to make sure you qualify and get those points, but when it comes to round 2, it's going to be very straightforward because winning is pretty much how you make it happen. So all in all, focus on your fundamentals, get really good at endgame, and you should be good. Well, with all that said guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on how to dominate solo victory cups in chapter 4 season 3. Overall, we covered a lot in this video, but hopefully this helped you guys out. If you found this video helpful, then as always, be sure to drop a like on it, subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want to see more, and of course, it's always appreciated if you could use code Teckoh in the item shop. It only takes a couple seconds to type in, and it seriously does help me out a bunch. As always, a giant thank you to everyone who uses it. And lastly guys, let me know down in the comments what you guys want to see next on the channel. I've got a lot of videos in the works right now, but I'm also always looking for ideas. I'm trying to post pretty consistently this season, so definitely let me know what you guys want to see. But with all that said, thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.